Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today we have with us Micaela Passeri. She is a six-time award-winning emotional intelligence business strategist, a coach, an international speaker, a best-selling author, and community leader with over 20 years of experience building six- and seven-figure businesses. With result-focused income-generating strategies, Micaela puts her two business degrees, experience, and many certifications to use by helping entrepreneurs and business owners make more, feel fulfilled, and experience personal and financial freedom. Welcome, Micaela.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about how you got into the emotional intelligence world, because that's what we're going to be talking about today.
I know, right? And we had hours and hours. It's a long story, but to make it really quick, it's really what I did for myself. As I was in my own personal development journey and really inquiry and self-discovery and did a lot of courses, a lot of experiences, dabbled into a lot of modalities, I grew and I expanded. And one day I was like, okay, what is this? What is this that I'm experiencing? And what I came to was that I had raised my emotional intelligence by working on making peace with my past, letting go of the limiting conversations, open up to possibility. I really was able to raise my emotional vibration and therefore my emotional intelligence. And, again, we have a very short time. So the impetus was really wanting to not feel pain anymore. For me, what kind of really got me on the journey is the pain of grief. My father had passed away in a horrible car accident in Bulgaria. I was 20 years old and I couldn't handle the pain. I had never felt that kind of pain before. I just couldn't handle it. And then as the years, started delving on my own, I didn't really have anybody to really guide me. And I just stumbled upon things. Universe always puts the teacher in front of you when you're ready, right? And so I just kind of followed the signs and dabbled into a lot of things. And then through my experiences with, relationships, business, all of that, I just started to understand more on how I was working, how I was making decisions. And then that's where that kind of, interpersonal work just kind of kept on going. And then eventually I found a modality that really, really did it for me, which is called emotional intelligence. And I found that through that, I was able to really pinpoint what was stuck in the subconscious, because a lot of what I was experiencing was, okay, I get that there's something there. I get there's something there. I get there's something stopping me, but what the hell is it? I can't get to it. Like, how am I, right? And so emotion code was the modality that allowed the practitioner to just go right into the subconscious mind to find out what trapped emotions were connected to the various patterns that I was experiencing and the emotions that I was experiencing. And so then I decided, okay, that's it. This is amazing. I know where I was and where I am now. I want everybody to have this experience, especially women, because I took myself from a very low confidence, low self-value, low self-esteem to confidence, right? To a very clear self-value. And so I really wanted everybody to experience that, and specifically women. And then that's how I became a practitioner of emotion code. And then I dabbled into NLP, and I combined it with my my business degrees. I have two business degrees. And so now I'm combining my certifications in the healing arts with my degrees in business. And that's how I help people really understand how to release the trapped emotions that are holding them back by achieving the monetary and the monetary results that they want, therefore their income and their business satisfaction through.
And then combine that with lived experience of having gone through the entire process yourself. So you're not just reading a book, you did it, you saw it work. So I'm going to go all the way back. Explain to the people that are listening that are going, what the heck is emotional intelligence? I know what my version is, but you're the expert. So put it in layman's terms. Like, when you think of emotional intelligence, what do you think about?
So the really simplest way to explain it is the ability that a human being has to self-regulate, therefore regulate and manage their emotions. There are 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, which are the process in which a human being will manage themselves. It happens really quickly. At the beginning, as you're consciously engaging in the process, it'll feel like efforting because you're not used to thinking that way or processing yourself in that way. But eventually it becomes like a snap, really instant kind of a moment. But you're literally noticing your emotions. Then you go to understand. So that's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is once you notice the emotion and the experience that you're having, you go to understand it. So that's the self-introspection. What is this about? What's underneath this? Why am I experiencing this? What is the thing that I'm supposed to see that I'm not seeing right now? So it's really introspecting. That's number 2. Number 3 is then once you've identified and understand it, then you start, using it, right? So you start shifting yourself and choosing something else. So if your pattern would be to go down road A, then you consciously choose to go down road B, right? So that's the the management part, right? You're managing your emotion. That's pillar number 3. And then pillar number 4 is you empower yourself. You use that understanding, that awareness to then empower yourself to choose differently. That's basically emotional intelligence.
Okay. And then, of course, it has to do with, obviously, when you've got these patterns, then it's being able to understand the emotions of other people and why they're kind of going through. Does that have a lot to do with it too?
Well, yes and no, meaning, so the 4 pillars are the process in which we actually use the tool of emotional intelligence. Then emotional intelligence, when we kind of step a little bit outside of that, what emotional intelligence does, so the results, it helps us with motivation, it helps us with empathy and therefore understanding other people, because now we're understanding ourselves better. Therefore, then we can understand other people by noticing the same type of patterns or similar patterns that we process ourselves out of, and therefore there's more understanding. The self-regulation is obviously one of those, and problem solving, really being able to see have a more macro view instead of a very limited focused view of things. The other thing is emotional intelligence helps us really stand into possibility, really having that glass half full instead of glass half empty view of life, which is really anchored in optimism. So there's a lot of things that once you're in high emotional intelligence that you can actually have an affect on, right? But in reality, the process it's an internal process, and it's also the brain. The brain is constantly wanting to predict what we're doing, what we're about to experience, right? And it will predict based on past experiences, so right, based on our conditioning. So that's why emotional intelligence and the part of emotional intelligence that is self-regulatory is very important, is because then you can manage that brain function that wants to predict and therefore then take action on the usual conditioning. We then steer it and manage it a different way.
Perfect. Can you give me or the people listening an example, like something that might happen at work where if you are not emotionally intelligent, you might react one way versus a process of thinking through it and acting a different way?
Yeah, actually, I will tell you this, what happened to a client of mine just last week. She is a manager she's a newly appointed manager. She was just hired for a senior living. And she came in with, people to manage. And she didn't know coming in that her assistant had put in for her position and she didn't get the position. So here's the assistant, but been there for a while, put in for the position, didn't get the position, and then now is having to work with the person that actually got the position that she wanted.
Right.
Right. So there's these 2 people. One, by the way, my client has a lot of emotional intelligence experience. She's a coach herself, so she understands the process. So here she notices that this woman is starting to sabotage things for her. So she's talking to the residents, talking bad about the company, about her, that she doesn't even know. So that she's noticing that there's these things that are happening. So the assistant is in her full reaction. She is not at all emotionally intelligent. She's in her full reaction of feeling hurt and feeling left out, and basically in a vengeful type of reaction of having not been given the job. And so she's creating havoc. Okay,
Right.
so that's one side. So that is an example of a non-emotionally intelligent human being, literally just being in the affect of her emotions, which is anger, resentment, disappointment, betrayal,
Or,
maybe
yep.
betrayal. And on the other side, my client, who's a coach, who does coach in emotional intelligence, was like, okay, I see what's happening. I see why it's happening, right? Let me manage the situation in a way that doesn't create more distance between the residents that she's gonna have to continue working with and herself. And so she started putting some strategies in place to manage the residents, and then also she made an offer to the lady to leave. So her idea was, okay, she's clearly only has a couple of weeks to go. She's upset. Why don't we give her a goodbye check so that she can go? And so that's how she navigated that situation, which could have totally exploded, has she been also in reaction to her own emotions. And what she was experiencing was frustration, a bit of overwhelm, some confusion, and then kind of like, not anger, but like, dudes, you just hired me and you didn't tell me what I was walking into, kind of thing.
Right.
So surprise and shock, right? Yeah, so there was a little bit, she had to manage her new bosses. She had to suggest this thing, convince them, enroll them, let me use a better word, enroll them into her idea so that she could then remove the cancer and then
Right.
be able to then start nurturing the residents in the way that they need to be nurtured.
Got you. Perfect example. And I think that, yes, and it could have got, like you said, putting two emotionally not intelligent people together can
Right.
it's just a reactive back and forth bickering, and just there's nothing ever resolved, nothing ever comes to fruition at all. If you have children, can you suggest, do you work with children at all, or with parents?
I don't work with children, but I do work with parents.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions to the parents to help their children develop these emotional intelligence skills or this process?
Yes, and one of them is something that we don't do often enough, which is communication. So communicating, number one, is communicating with your children in a way that it explains to them their responsibility, so that then they can take on being responsible for their decisions and their actions. And you do that through communication and not necessarily, punishment, yelling, reactivity, things like that. And so really communicating with the child and having them understand what they decide to do, so their decisions and their actions have certain consequences, and how those consequences are their responsibility and not somebody else's responsibility, is really important. Because that way they're raising socially responsible and relationship responsible human beings, because they won't look at the way that they experience life from a victim standpoint,
Right.
from life is being done unto me, but from I'm in charge of my life because I'm having an affect to everything around me. So I am at the helm of my life. I'm responsible for what happens. And, you can do, when they're really little, it's hard really for them to understand this. So you can do that through games, things like that. But as they grow older, then you can really have some deep conversations with them.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of the people, being that this podcast is called Adult Child of Dysfunction, a lot of people obviously were not taught these skills. Going in, so say you're a young adult and you're listening to this again and you're like, oh, what the heck? Are there, you gave kind of the four pillars. Are there some tips you can get people to get started? Is there I mean, obviously go see you. That's the easy one.
Yeah.
Um, but say they're not. Let's say they just go, okay, I want to start doing this. Would you say like self-awareness is the first thing and just being able to get grasp of their emotions in general?
Yeah, so this is kind of what happens is, yes, absolutely. Awareness is key number one. You have to start practicing awareness. And so how do you start practicing awareness when it's like, well, if I'm not aware, how can I be aware, right? It's kind of like a catch-22. And so how you do that, you just start noticing your thoughts and you start noticing your feelings, how you're feeling. So something's happening, start noticing. What am I feeling? What are the thoughts that are coming up? What are the emotions that are coming up? So that's a small practice that you can start doing to start being more aware. Then it's introspecting. It's asking yourself those questions. Now, the problem or the challenge, so to speak, is that it will be hard for someone to see themselves. And so that's why seeing someone like me, a practitioner that can actually kind of, you're in the fishbowl and it's hard for you to see that the water that you've been swimming in is murky because you haven't cleaned it, right? You haven't gone in and introspected. So you need somebody to take you out so that you can see and say, oh, I see my water is murky. I need to clean it. I need to do some inner work, right? So it is easier and faster for that process to happen when you've got someone that can help you see it. On your own, it's a journey, and it's a journey that can take a lot of time, a lot of effort, but it's not impossible. It's just about using your awareness, asking yourself those introspective questions, and then really choosing differently, shifting, choosing different ways of being, different ways of doing, and just looking at ways that you can create pattern interrupts.
And like you said, I mean, I'm just taking my own life, for instance, who I remember the first time I walked into a therapist's office and they were like, well, how does that make you feel? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like I was starting from ground zero. Like I had no emotion. I was completely emotionally dead in general. So it took me, I would probably say 2 years, honestly, of even, and this is back at 20, 30 years ago, but of even being able to be aware of my emotions. And then, like if someone had said to me, well, where does that come from? I have no freaking idea. Like,
I
because
know
that's
that,
how I was told to do. Like,
yeah.
so I mean, you're right. It is such a process. And that's why there's people out here who have, I mean, it took me 30 years. So didn't have to, had
Yeah,
it didn't have to. I mean,
yeah,
had
there's
I
a
known,
lot of resources and
yeah,
people that can support you in the journey for sure. Yeah.
yes. But self-awareness is because it gives you if you know you're on this journey and you hear this or you hear the word emotional intelligence and you start reading and you start doing, you have to, obviously that's a big self looking, you have to look inside yourself,
You do. You,
obviously, and that's
and
one of the hardest parts of the journey.
yeah, so you have to have the desire to do it. You have to
Mhm.
have the desire to discover yourself. Because if not, you're gonna basically X everything and you're gonna just create more resistance. And what you resist persists. And so it's just gonna be a vicious cycle of not feeling good.
Yeah,
Part of
absolutely.
emotional intelligence, part of the underlying goal of emotional intelligence is to feel good. So it's like, where is that next better feeling place gonna come from? Where am I gonna seek that and find it? And that's also something that can help you deter yourself from the things that don't make you feel good and to notice your emotions. If you're someone like you, where you were really disconnected from your emotions, is really thinking like, okay, how am I, like digging deep inside, okay, what can I do today to feel good?
Mhm. Yeah.
Maybe it's just walking outside. Maybe it's listening to a piece of music. Maybe it's reading a good, empowering book. Maybe it's just resting. Maybe it's who knows what, something, what is that? It's looking for that next better feeling place. And as you keep looking for that next better feeling place, that's also a way to practice awareness.
Yeah.
And so that awareness, you'll start noticing, oh, ooh, this feels icky. This feels prickly. This feels heavy. And then you're like, where's the next better place that I can go to? And that's how then you can also practice the shifting.
Right. And even just with dealing situational things, like dealing with someone at work, it's like, okay, how can I make this feel better for both of us? Literally, it's, and that I'm sure empathy, I know empathy is a huge part of it, just walking in other people's shoes, and then you're not, you're, because you're anticipating their reaction. So let's see where they're at. It's,
I'll give you an example. Literally just yesterday, I had something like this happen. I'm here in Italy in a construction. I'm remodeling the apartment that I have here. And there are three other owners in this building. And we have been for months trying to decide to do some work. And we have to, so in America, we have HOAs, right?
Mhm.
Here, it works a little bit different. In this specific condominium building, because there's only 4 of us, it's not, we don't have to. So it's all of us, but it takes longer to make decisions. So anyway, so I had to call him because we had been sending him emails like, we got to start this work. You need to sign this paperwork. So I finally get a hold of him and he's like, well, what about the damage of the water? That's been 2 years that I've been asking the person above me, which isn't me, someone else, to, talk to about. I said, well, we need to discuss that in a meeting. Like now that we have a working type of association, we can do that. And he started getting really like angry and upset. Well, I'm not going to sign anything until blah, blah, blah. And I said, wait a minute. I said, calm down. That's not the right way to do it. Let's just take a breath. So I had to manage him. I knew where he was coming from. I knew that he was frustrated. And so I had to, first of all, calm him down because I had that awareness. But also I said, look, the last couple of years, there's been a bit of a chaos because some of the apartments have been sold. Now we have a working meeting plan. We're going to get these things done. And frankly, we just had a meeting last week and you weren't there and we talked about this. So take a breath. And so he was able to calm down. It's like, okay, fine, send these to me. I'll sign it. Right.
right.
So it was really just understanding where he was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't have that understanding and that ability to manage, I could have reacted to him and started yelling back at him. Right.
Yeah. Fine. Don't sign it. You screw you.
Yeah, right. I'll tell my attorney to call you. Right. I mean, it could have been, it could have just escalated. But because I had that awareness and I had that understanding, I managed him and I managed his reaction and I de-escalated his reaction.
Right.
So now, finally, we're going to start this work, but it's like, it's this, you could say like, oh, well, what is emotional intelligence? How important is it really? Whatever, right? You could discount it. No. In every single aspect of your life. I mean, from this little thing to, it could be relationship with your kids, relationship with your boss, relationship with your husband, wife, lovers. It could be, it presents itself in any situations. And the most important one it presents itself is a relationship with yourself.
Yes.
So emotional intelligence is absolutely one of the most important tools that you want to discover and really learn because it is a skill.
Yeah.
It is part of unconditioning ourselves. So it is a skill. It's something that we learn to uncondition ourselves so that then we can recondition ourselves the way that we want. And so it's really important. It's important to look at ourselves in this way and to see it as something really that we should look into.
Yeah. I think it was you I was talking to that you said, get the book, The Emotion Code. Is that what started you out?
Yeah. Cause I didn't start with the book. I actually was a client of a practitioner.
Okay.
Who practiced emotion code. And that's where I just, stuff opened up so quickly and so fast for me. And I was able to really make some really big shifts and changes in my life because of my work in emotion code. But then I actually became a practitioner. So I got certified and that's what my two main modalities that I use is emotion coded and NLP, neuro-linguistic program. But emotion code, I never read the book. I just did the course.
Oh, okay. You did the work. Yeah. And I love that you said that you did a bunch of research first. You started reading awareness and doing all this stuff. And then you're like, huh, what is this word? And then let me get to a coach or let me get to a practitioner, because, it's just like any healing journey or any of these modalities. The steps are very simple, but it's how to implement them. Like, you can't just read and do this. You can't.
You can't, and this is the thing that it's really important to understand, because it's part of the flawed nature of humans, right? It's part of our flawed nature, because if we could just say, okay, I'm just gonna read this, and then let's just talk about, for example, of losing weight. If we could all lose weight like that by reading a book or doing a program, then we would already all have done that.
Right.
But we don't. Why? Because we are constantly having to face ourselves and our maybe, whatever issues that are coming up mentally, emotionally. Maybe we're not motivated. Maybe we're depressed. Like, we're constantly facing our inner landscape, because if it was that easy, we would do it.
We'd all do it.
So it's the same thing here. If it was that easy to get over our past and get over our emotional baggage, then we would do it, but it's not.
Right.
It's not, because it takes effort, and it takes us to constantly recommit ourselves to where we want to get to. It's a constant recommitment to ourselves, really. And so that's why it's really good to have someone that can guide you the way, that can hold your hand, that can help you, that can be that window for you to see from a new perspective.
Exactly. And like you said, it's literally reprogramming the subconscious. So when you're working off of your subconscious, you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You need an outsider. You need someone to look at you and go, well, did you ever think about it this way? Or let's reframe that a little bit. Let's, and just like you said, hold your hand, walk with you. But I love this conversation because it's so important. I think I was telling you, I had a friend who was very, very into teaching her children emotional intelligence, and she wrote a book called Raising Badass Humans. And it was a great little book. And then unfortunately she passed in a domestic violence dispute, which is even more sad. So it was like everything she was teaching her kids and trying to escape, and like all of this like kind of came in together, and it was it was horrible. But her kids, boy, I'm glad they had the upbringing that they did before that happened, because just to be able to process some of these things.
Yeah, I was literally going to say they probably were able to process the grief much better than if they hadn't received that.
Absolutely, because I know how she brought them up, and they're at a much better starting point than like you were when your father was killed at 20. I mean, and you just don't have it. So I encourage, everybody out there, start teaching your kids there. And communication is the number one thing with kids. And that just goes, I think, to everything with children. But
it does. Yeah.
Well, this was super fun. If people want to learn about you, where can they come to find you if they want to hear more or learn more?
Yeah, well, my website is loveyourevolution.com. So they can go there, and I believe there you can book a 15-minute connection call with me just to explore things, ask questions. If this is conversation that interests you, I'm always up to, I love geeking out on EI. So you can definitely book a quick call there with me. I also do readings on people's emotional vibration. So you can go to yourmoneymastery.com for that, mainly because I do it for entrepreneurs in their quest to really create a business that can then give them the lifestyle that they want. But it applies to everybody. Reading your energy applies to, doesn't have to be entrepreneurs. So you could go there, or you can find me on Facebook under Micaela Passeri. I believe my thing is facebook.com/real Micaela Passeri, because somebody created a fake thing for me. So it's real Micaela Passeri.
So in line with all your authentic understanding you might as well be the real one, right?
Exactly. As well.
Absolutely. And all of these links and everything will be in the show notes. I just wanted to have you tell people the absolute best, quickest way to get to you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming. But before you leave, I want you to leave the listeners who may not know anything about emotional intelligence or even whether they have it or don't. Give them some maybe tips or tricks or maybe some words of wisdom.
Yeah, I think that the first thing that I would like to say, because I know we're talking with an audience that really is coming from a place of hurt and pain and dysfunction. And so really telling people there is light at the end of the tunnel. Like you can feel better. You can absolutely get to a place where you can empower yourself and stop the negative patterns. So that's the first thing that I would like to say. But I think really tips and tricks, and one of the things that I share with my clients is the rubber band exercise. So it's a good exercise to help you negate and get out of a negative mental pattern. So you put a rubber band, you start wearing a rubber band. That's your new piece of jewelry. It's got to be a pretty tight one. And every time you notice yourself going down a negative conversation or a negative pattern, so whatever that is for you, whether it's down, the self-love, not good enough conversation, maybe it's a pattern of self-destruction, whatever it is, you notice that it's a negative pattern, you snap yourself. Next time you have the awareness, you snap yourself. You keep on snapping yourself, and literally, eventually, you will snap yourself out of that pattern. Because what you're doing, you're creating a new neural pathway in the brain. And the way that you're doing that is every time you're having that negative thought, you create pain. And the brain's going to start noticing and say, ooh, ouch, that thought hurts. Then you do it again. Ooh, that thought hurts. And eventually it won't want to think the thought because it hurts. Because the brain wants to avoid pain. The subconscious and the brain wants to avoid feeling the pain. And so eventually
Pavlov's conditioning.
So you will, you'll eventually stop that conversation.
That's a great idea.
And then there's obviously work to create new conversations and create a new neural pathway. So that's a whole other thing. But that's a start, is just to start snapping yourself out of your stuff.
Literally. Yeah,
Literally.
I love that.
Yeah, literally snapping yourself out of it.
Absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much for that. That was a
You're
good
welcome.
one.
You're welcome.
I love that. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, anytime. And for the people out there listening, go read about emotional intelligence. It's something that, like she said, everything stems around it. Every relationship, every reaction, everything. And the more emotionally intelligent we can be, the happier we can be, and the happier the people around us can be, and we can help them to be. So you guys, yeah, absolutely. Look into it and get into it. And you have a blessed week. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.